Our guest this week, one of the finest sports teams ever assembled. Lance, Suneel, and Claude join me on the show. Joe Tilley Sports, coming up. Welcome to the program. We are going to have some fun today, folks. I've got three very special guests. Let me introduce them to you. He hails from Edmonton, Alberta, former reporter and anchor at ITV, former reporter and anchor at BCTV, Oilers host on CFRN, sports anchor at CFTO and CTV for 32 years, sports director at CTV Toronto, co-host of Blue Jays This Week, now a Ward 5 councillor in Scugog Township, Lance Brown, ladies and gentlemen, former reporter and anchor at CFRB, former reporter and anchor at City TV. Oh, we're going to go to Claude next. Sorry. Former reporter for Global Sportsline, former reporter at CFTO and CTV, former reporter at TSN, host anchor reporter at TSN Radio, host anchor at CFRB Radio, broadcast media instructor at Centennial and Seneca College, Claude Feig, and last but certainly not least, former reporter and anchor at CFRB, former reporter and anchor at City TV, former anchor and host at Sportsnet and TSN, a former reporter and anchor at CFTO and CTV. You can now hear him on 105.9, The Region. Suneel Joshi, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, fellas.
From the guys who know the score, Lance.
5-4 in overtime.
Claude.
He shoots.
He scores.
Suneel.
Boom goes the dynamite.
And Little Joe.
It's a nickname.
The CTV News sports team. They know the score. Every night at 6 and 11:30.
See, they messed that up. There was supposed to be Big Joe, but
Oh, right.
guys, that's not going to be as funny as Little Joe. Well, let's just go with Little Joe. Hey, guys, welcome to the show, man. It's great to have you here. Lance, I want to start with you. I want to tell us a little bit about being a councillor in Scugog Township and how that came to be and what your job entails, and tell us a little bit about that.
Well, the two least trusted jobs on earth, media and politics. So I figured I would be able to slide from one right into the other. I sat around for about 6 months after we left Bell TV and decided that I needed to do something because it was driving my wife nuts and I was driving myself crazy. So I had the opportunity to run in a ward that I'm across the street from technically, but I thought I'd give it a shot. I couldn't do nothing, so I wanted to see if I could do some good for people. And 2.5 years in, and hopefully I have. I've learned a lot about politics, even in a small town, but sometimes more in a small town than otherwise. But overall, it's been pretty good. People have been great, so I've enjoyed it. I'm only doing 1 year.
Good to hear,
term.
Lance. One term? You're the one-term guy? That's it?
I'm a one-term guy.
All right, Suneel.
For 4 years.
Yeah. That's it. Oh, see, Suneel, tell us about the Region 105.9 and your gig there, and tell us about some of the acting stuff you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, my situation is the same as Lance. After I was let go in November of 2015, Lance had a hand in that, by the way. Just kidding. He had nothing to do with it. I started looking for work. I worked up north. I did some commercials for an FM station in New Liskeard, Ontario, which is north of North Bay, at CJTT-FM. A former colleague of ours was an intern, in fact, at Sportsnet when I worked there, and he's now the program director in Morning Man. So I was looking at things, and I also decided, okay, well, try and do things like there's lots of newscaster roles out there. So I managed to get a couple of shots on a show called American Gothic on CBS. It did a couple of reporter type things. And then out of the clear blue, Bill Hutchison called me. We all remember him. And he said, hey, there's a radio station up in York Region that's looking for a morning newscaster. He said, I can't do it because of my teaching responsibilities, so why don't you go in? And as it turned out, the manager and the station manager and the news director is Tina Cortez, with whom I worked at City TV back in 1977, 78. And she's now the boss there, so she hired me. And when I walked in, who else is there? Galit Solomon, who worked in our newsroom at CFTO, CTV. And Romer's there, Jim Lang, who worked at Sportsnet. He's the morning man. So it's sort of like old home week for all of us.
Wow. That's a good group over there for sure. That's awesome. Listen to 105.9 The Region, folks. Okay. Okay, Claude, tell us about your gig teaching at Seneca and Centennial. Oh, you're muted, I think, Claude. Can't hear you. Is this what Claude's teaching his students? How to...
Yeah, exactly. Turn your mic on.
Turn your mic on.
Just use placards, Claude. Just hold up signs.
Okay, here we go.
I'm Claude Feig.
Okay, can't hear you, Claude. So I tell you what. Here's what we're trying this. Try the old trick. Sign off and then sign back in. We'll see if you can if we can catch your audio that way. Sometimes that works. You know, it's when in doubt, sign off and sign back in, and that works. The tricks of the trade here. So as we're waiting for Claude to sign back on, which really shouldn't take long. I want to say that it's. Oh, there he is. Sorry. Okay, let's go back to Claude. Here we go.
All right. Sorry about that. Yeah. This is just one of the challenges of trying to teach an online class. Never mind just talking to former colleagues. As I was saying, speaking of Bill Hutchison, he's now one of the heads at the School of Media at Seneca. He gave me a call early January and said, "Are you interested in teaching a program here this coming semester?" And I said, "Sure. I definitely have time for that. It's going to be all online." And I said, "Well, okay, that'll be interesting." But as it turns out, it was teaching the software that we use at most radio stations, the Burley software. And so, it's been interesting trying to do it online. The app has, gives us our sometimes because it's a remote thing as opposed to being in the school. But anyway, I've already been teaching the last 4 years at Centennial College in the sports journalism program. It's a graduate program. I've been doing that for the last 4 summers. So wanting to teach at my alma mater, Seneca, was great. It was almost like a dream come true for me. It was a way to give back. And so far, so good. I'm going to teach there again in the summertime. I'm also going back to teach at Centennial starting in a couple weeks. And, and I've got a possibility of getting back on the air here in Toronto soon. So I'm allowed to talk about it, but it'll be on radio.
Okay.
But hopefully that's going to happen too. So, you try to do what you can, right, guys? I mean, like you say, you found a niche somehow, and maybe it wasn't the door that you thought you were going to walk through. But as long as it works out, that's all you can ask for, especially as we all deal with this crazy pandemic that we never saw coming. The main thing is everybody's healthy and happy and trying to live your life.
Well, let's talk, Claude. I just want to touch on this. Like, you're what do you tell these students that you've got at Centennial and Seneca, but getting jobs in this business? I mean, look what's happened to the industry. Like, all 4 of us are no longer employed in that particular industry. And what do you say to them? What kind of jobs do they expect to get out of after in journalism?
Well, it's interesting because I've got 30 students this semester. We do 2 classes. Not many of them want to be on air. A lot of them want to do writing. They want to maybe do podcasts. So the mindset has changed. Like when we were in school, you had 3 options, right? You had TV, you had radio, and you had print. Well, that's all been, blown out of whack here in the last 10 or 15 years. And obviously the digital era has arrived. So there's more options that way. I find a lot of former students have started their own websites. They're doing their own writing. And then you try to get advertising dollars that way, I guess. And some people are doing podcasts. I've had a few students who actually ended up on air somewhere. I guess one of the most famous ones now is that if you guys listen to Overdrive, another former employer of mine there at TSN, there's a guy named Al's brother who actually was one of my students at Centennial. So, and I've got another former student who's a reporter at CBC here in Toronto. So, it's not so much, see, the one thing I hate, and I hated when I was in school, was to be told by somebody in the industry, don't bother applying because there are no jobs, you're disappointed, go look for another career. I'm not doing that. I'm trying to look at the glass half full somehow, and just say to them, follow your heart, follow your passion. Whether you get in or not, you have no control over that, but you have control of trying to get to that door to be able to knock on it and see if somebody will let in. After that, the rest is out of your control. But like I said, a lot of people seem to be going in directions that almost fit the career of what's going on right now, which is the more digitally based type of jobs and not necessarily wanting to be on air and get their face time.
Right. So let's talk about the job that the two major media conglomerates in this country are doing. Suneel, before we got on the show, you talked about a little bit about when you left CTV, what that was like, and I think Claude brought up something about the 100-day thing, and we talked, and you said no, it wasn't quite that for me.
For me, it was 100 seconds, and I didn't even get a chance to walk down the hall and get my jacket and keys from my desk and say goodbye to you and Lance. I was escorted out the building. I was literally just, you're done, please. Here's your and leave. And that was it. And I sat in my car in the parking lot, and there was the security guard waiting for me to get the car started and go through the gate that we used to do that for hundreds and hundreds of times.
Right. Can I just take a minute here? Come on. Yeah.
Seriously.
No,
Okay.
it was not allowed.
Yeah.
I mean, the only thing he
Lance,
didn't do
let's
was
go
tap
back
on the
to,
window and say, get it going.
Right.
Amazing.
I remember, let's go back to you and I, Lance. I remember it was a short, I'm going to say a few months, 3 or 4 months before we got our announcement. It was like, I remember going to the president of news at the time, and I said to her, I said, they stopped doing sports in Montreal, they stopped doing sports in Ottawa, they stopped doing sports all these places across. Like, are we next? And she said, no, you guys don't worry, you guys are doing a great job. Just continue what you're doing. Everything's cool with you. And I know, as a sports director, you never got an inkling that things were any different, I'm assuming.
Well, I watched it happen throughout the country. I think it started in Southern Ontario, in Windsor and London, and they let all the small sports departments go. Then they went across the country and did Vancouver and Edmonton and Calgary. And when they got to Montreal, there wasn't much left. I think it was us in Montreal, and I think it was 4 guys go in Montreal, and there was a huge hullabaloo about that. So I think they waited a little while before they came to us, but it was, somebody obviously decided that we were making too much money for the work that we were doing, which of course isn't true because you know how hard we all worked.
So
some days.
Well, I waiting for somebody to say something. No, but
let's face it, it was a pretty good
I
gig.
think somebody. Yeah, it was a great gig. Somebody went through with a pencil or a pen or whatever and said, "This guy, Lance Brown, he's making too much money. Get rid of him." What does he do? Sports. Well, we don't need sports anymore because we're getting rid of sports anyway. And I guess they did that with everybody. So. We were lucky to last as long as we did. I don't have a lot of conversations with people in the media anymore, but if I did, I'd say, hey, listen, if you can last for 30 years or whatever in this business these days, you're doing well. There'll be no more Dave Duvall's at 48 years. That's never going to happen again.
No.
But the longer you pedal, I guess, the better it is for you. And it's a changing business. As Claude suggests, everything is changing, and it's become a lot more computer and internet oriented. And the younger people can adapt to that, and we can just take it easy and choose other careers for if we want, or retire, which I did technically.
Right. Yeah, technically, yeah.
Technically.
Well, the folks in Scugog County are happy that you didn't, Lance. Claude, tell us about your scenario over there at RB.
Well, like all in our newsroom, we basically were told we had a conference call. I think it was on a Tuesday, and once we chimed in, and based on past experiences, if you were on a conference call, that was usually a good sign. That meant they were those are the people that were staying, and they were trying to regroup everybody else. But in this case, we were on the conference call. We didn't know who also was on the call. You couldn't hear anybody because they had muted everybody's mics. And then this voice came on. It could have been recorded for all we know, but somebody that came on in authority said, "We're sorry to inform you, you're being let go, and you'll be contacted by HR." And honestly, the call lasted maybe 30 seconds, and then they just hung up. They digatory thank you for your service and all that nonsense. And then they just hung up, and that was it. Now, for me, that was the second in the radio division at Bell Media that had happened to me. At least this time I was at home. The first time I was told to come in and talk to the boss, who then promptly escorted me up to HR. And I knew we were in Scarborough then, so you guys know the Agincourt building. As soon as we made the turn from the radio station towards the stairs, I knew exactly where we were going. This time around, it still hurt, but it didn't hurt me as bad as the last time, because that last time was, that was more impactful for me and my family. And I mean, that had been my career with that company. It was almost 20 years then. But this time around was, and I heard a lot of really bad stories from other people across the country here in Toronto about how they were treated and how this has all gone down. It's very disappointing. I mean, there's no question that it's a corporate entity trying to run a broadcast division, and they don't have a clue about what broadcast is anyway. And then second to that, they don't treat their people very well. They treat their bottom line and their investors than they do their own employees, and that's never good either. And so they've lowered the bar as far as what they do on air, but they raised the bar on how they treat the people, the very people that work their tails off for them to make them viable and make money for them. Just basically turn their back on them. And as Lance said, it was just a number. They go down the list. Oh, this person's making this much, get them out. And we've seen this with the people that were let go this year, all the years. It makes no sense as to how they came to that conclusion as to who to let go. I think the biggest puzzling one was the fact that this company, to sports, was no longer important across the country, especially in the smaller markets where local sports means a hell of a lot more than maybe it does here in Toronto. But as we proved over the years, fellas, we made local sports here really matter because we brought stories to air that nobody else did, and we made a difference, I thought. And so the fact that this company decided, you know what, sports isn't important. We have TSN. People have to pay to subscribe to watch TSN, so that's what they'll do if they want. Just absolutely mind-numbing that they've done that.
And of course, TSN does not cover any local sports.
No.
There's other stuff going on. Like, I mean, I want to talk about the situation at RB, Claude, and it's like this happened. I think it was like a week after their Let's Talk thing, and it's also and a couple of days after that, some other stuff was going on, right? So, Suneel, I think you were speaking on that, right?
True. Yeah. I mean, it literally happened 2 or 3 days after the Bell Let's Talk program, where they were patting themselves on the back for how much money they raised. And then 2 days later, we started hearing about things that were happening here in Toronto and across the country. And by the end of the week, the people that caught on and were infuriated, and I'm speaking of the audience out there, And of course, they changed on Twitter the hashtag from Bell Let's Talk to Bell Let's Cut.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And let's walk. Right.
And let's walk.
So, you know, it's
We also
interesting. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I just want to say we also heard a lot of stories about people who still work for the company over the years trying to get help for their mental health issues, being told, no, we're not covering you, or we can't help you. And this is the company that prides itself on the mental health aspect of society, and they turn their back on their own people. Like that's even more disturbing than anything else.
Yeah. Lance, any thoughts on the mental well-being part of it?
Well, the one thing as I'm listening to you guys talk about it, I think about the Big Nine and what it meant to all of us, and then I realize that it's still going on. I understand that the people who are, we're all still, I'm sure, connected to people who work there, and what I hear from them is they let Tom Brown go, which I don't understand because he was excellent. Then they let Anwar go, which doesn't make any sense either because those were two of the most professional weathermen I'd ever seen. Both of them were outstanding. Mm-hmm. So the changes are still going on. So what's happening back there is people are still working, but they're working more than they ever did. I did an interview with a reporter after Tom Gibney passed away, and in the background, there was nobody there. And I was told that the assignment editor on weekends doesn't even exist. The position doesn't exist anymore. So I don't know how they find their stories or what they do. But as Claude, I think, suggested, it's a big conglomerate, and I'm not sure that they understand what they're doing. They're just looking at the bottom line, but it's unfortunate because it makes you not want to watch anymore. And those of us who are in the know, it kind of makes you disgusted because of the way that they've gone about the cuts and the fact that it's affected the programming. I don't know whether people at home recognize it or not. I imagine they do on a cursory basis. Where's Tom? Where's Anwar? But as a broadcast veteran, if I can call myself that, it's a shame to see it because it's not the same product anymore, and it used to be so great. Even under the Bassets, it was an excellent program, I thought.
Well, yeah.
I don't know if Douglas
would walk down the halls and he knew all 4,000 people that worked there, right? And he'd say hi to all of them.
Exactly.
And he'd say, how's your wife? How's your, that was a different time, of course. But and when they had the big lockout or strike or whatever it was back in the 80s. Everybody kept their job, even though they broke the union. Douglas made sure everybody kept their job, and it was a different time. It's like, sure, the company might lose $2 million, or they might make $2 million less than they would, but they're still making $15 million or whatever at the time, and they're quite happy with that. It's like it all comes down to dollars and cents. But another aspect of this, which confuses me, is because this isn't just Bell, it's Rogers as well. These are the companies that own the Leafs, the Blue Jays, the Argos, the Raptors. Do you not want local coverage of these teams on your major television stations? Do you not want to promote your team through coverage? It seems like a real short-sighted, myopic view of what's really happening in the sports world, right? And what's happening right in front of you.
Well, they get a news person to do it now.
Yeah, I know. We got a news person who mispronounces the names, and the Blue Jays won 3-4 in 7 periods. Right? I mean, that's what you're. No offense to these people. They're doing the best they can with what they got, but right, it's a little bit different, right? It's not the same. So
you can't blame the anchors because they're only doing what they're told. But the fact that the
100%, right,
trying to sell this as a segment in a newscast when you're having a news anchor reading sports scores is ludicrous. I mean, that just shows that's where they've gone. They just think that's how little sports matters. It's a toss away thing to fill a couple of minutes, but they don't care whether the anchor knows anything about anything. They just make them read it. And like you said, Joe, many, many times you see a lot of gaffes, and it's almost like, why bother? Why are you guys bothering? Because you're not doing anything. You're not doing any local coverage anyway. And when you talk about the two conglomerates, Joe, the other issue is you can't do local sports for every team because a national network. So you can't spend 15 minutes on each city and each province because there goes your whole show. And the way they've structured structured these shows about highlight, and then scores, and then maybe the odd story, like a general story, and then maybe some sound from post game, and that's it. Those are that's what the highlight shows are now. And then they talk to the experts, and then they do their panel talk about a loss, with the Leafs lately, why it's 5 straight. The closest you get to local here, and that's it. And then they move on to something else. Just not much there anymore.
Right. Any thoughts, Suneel?
What are your thoughts, Joe?
Well, I as I mentioned, it's like, it's become so Toronto-centric too, right? I mean, there used to be complaints from across the country before that TSN, Sportsnet were so Toronto-centric. And now in order to give, Toronto, which is the largest market in the country, it's due, I suppose, or to give the largest group of viewers what they want, they got to go heavy on the Toronto scene. And that of course, that means less coverage for the Jets and the Oilers and the Flames and the Canucks and, and the Senators. And, and so they've got no local coverage now. So where do they get their information on their local teams? So it's that's what I say. It's a big problem.
Well, and the other thing is that now this year, of course, because of the pandemic, we don't have university or high school sports or junior hockey for that matter. So where are those stories which would have been told by us over the years about a university athlete who might want to go to a big school in the States, or perhaps even get drafted in the NFL? Those types of local stories, nobody's doing them, and they're just are falling by the wayside.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you notice in the States, that's not happening. That's not happening.
No,
every single market in the U.S. still has their local sports, and it's a big thing. And it's like
totally.
That's kind of like, do you not see that? Do you not see how this is working? Do you not see this as kind of driving, viewership?
No, and here's the other thing, Suneel and Joe, that in the States, first of all, local news has always been a big deal. No matter what company has bought them, the emphasis on local news as the national stuff is so paramount to their success. Even with the pandemic and even prior to that, a lot of stations closed, but of course the U.S. is a much bigger market. Still a lot of TV stations and radio stations that cover local sports. Obviously, high school, for example, in Texas, high school football is massive, so they're going to have local coverage of that. I mean, in general, I've talked to a few people who live and work in the States, sports broadcasting in the States, and they said there's no chance ever that that's going to happen. Would you ever think that New York, LA, Boston, Chicago are going to cut out local sports and have the news people do local sports so that they can keep the facade that they're trying to cover local sports? There's no chance. There's no chance. And unfortunately, what's happened in Canada is that everything's owned basically by two companies. So if you want to blame somebody else for some of this mess, you blame the CRTC for allowing this to happen. You blame them for having two big companies buy everything up where there is no competition and there's no chance for anybody to be able to do anything right? I mean, that's another right. Key failure of the government. And I know the government gets blamed for a lot of things, and no disrespect to all politicians, Lance. I'm just saying at the federal level, the CRTC. No, I'm serious. But CRTC, these are appointed positions. Most of the people that have ever served there in broadcast, they don't have a clue, and they have to oversee a lot of different things. It's not just broadcast. It's telecommunications. It's other facets. That's a lot to try to govern, but you're just saying to companies, yeah, sure, you can buy each other up, and then we won't have any competition. And they complain about the rates for phone bills, for some bills, about how they want that to be competitive, but they've absolutely turned their back on the broadcast industry as a whole and allowed this to happen.
Yeah, I think you nailed it, Claude. And like and of course with big corporations, it's all about the bottom line. And what does that do to company morale, like mental health, all these issues that they've been stressing that they're supporting, and what does that do for in relation to I mean, listen, we when we worked in the old regime, we felt like we had some value, and they went out of their way, even if it was a turkey at Christmas or whatever it was. They made us feel like we had some value, and we mattered, and there was some sort of a sense of they wanted their employees to know that they were valued, and I'm not seeing that in a lot of, maybe just not just with these corporations, with a lot of what's going on in the world right now, actually. Yeah.
That was no small thing
no,
either. It was a turkey for all of us, but it was the Basset budgies, we used to call it. But at Christmas time, everybody got a turkey, as you mentioned. But you know what? It was very symbolic. It was symbolic of the fact that they were still connecting with their people at a grassroots level, and that individual people meant something to them. And here was a little bit of added payback that they didn't have to do. And I don't know about the rest of you guys, but when they stopped that, I guess that was after Bell bought CTV. When they stopped that, that was a sign of things to come, a harbinger of doom, so to speak. Because at least for some of us, because it was obviously, it was corporate now. It wasn't family. We weren't the CTV family anymore. We were part of Bell Media.
Right.
Yeah, there's no doubt. Listen, even when Yvonne, and you mentioned Suneel, you were talking about Yvonne Fitzanne earlier, but even when Yvonne took over, we felt that there was a change, but it still felt like there was still some familial connection. He would come around from time. He didn't do what Mr. Bassett used to do, which was come in the newsroom all the time. He would come in the odd time and say hi, and especially the first few years at Christmas time or other times just to say hi. But you knew the company had changed, because then eventually it became Bell Globe Media and all that. But you still felt like there was, and remember we had all those great parties that the company threw in the first few years. So, I mean, there was still a connection. People still felt like you were appreciated in some way. And like you said, once 2011 hit, and that's the year that Bell bought CTV, things slowly started to change.
Sorry, Suneel, you had some thoughts on that?
No, I said that. Yeah, 100%. That's essentially what played out.
And you know what? We did, and that was Yvonne who threw those massive parties, and they were a lot of fun, and there was a lot of camaraderie, and I mean, some of that still exists. I mean, I can sense it. Our buddies Paul and some of the people that are still there, they send out postings and stuff like that. You can see, and Andrea, and these people are still they're still reaching out to a degree, and I can still sense some sort of camaraderie going on, but it's just not the same, and it doesn't seem to be very reciprocal, right? So I wanted to touch on this. Kind of went this direction. I wasn't sure. That's kind of not what I was where I was expecting to go with it entirely, but that's great, because I think there's a lot of stuff that maybe we have been able to get off our chest a little bit, things we haven't had a chance to say really. But I do want to go through some of the sports that's happening right now in Toronto, because I think we got four guys who've been around a long time and have some good thoughts on this stuff. First of all, let's talk about the hockey club, the Leafs. In a bit of a slump right now. Lance, are you concerned?
Well, when you've lived through it for as long as all of us have, you kind of roll your eyes and say, "Here we go again." I think in my tenure there, it's been they were good enough to win a Stanley Cup in the '90s. I tell my kids this: they were good enough to win in the early '90s. They were good enough to win in the early 2000s, and I don't know whether they're good enough to win this group yet, and if in fact they stay together and have the opportunity. But they're good. It's just they obviously need the goaltender back as fast as possible. I think they're not playing with a lot of confidence right now, but they have an opportunity to do something, and it's just whether or not they man up in the playoffs. I don't know. Nick Foligno's a great ad. I don't know whether or not they have enough grit in order to survive a playoff series, but we're about to find out, and they'll do better than they've done in the recent last few years or so. But the jury's still out for me on whether they're good enough to win a Stanley Cup. They may be, but if they are, then they better start showing it pretty quick.
Yeah, I think some things have to go right. Suneel, what do you think?
Well, I'm with Lance on the goaltender because they need a goaltender. I don't know who it's going to be that's going to step in. And as much as I've enjoyed the Canadian division and seeing Montreal and Edmonton more times than we normally would, I'm a little concerned because they haven't played the Bostons or Tampa or Washington or Pittsburgh, teams that are bigger, stronger, and certainly well seasoned when it comes to playoffs. And what's going to happen if they happen to win the Canadian division or the North division and suddenly run into a Boston and get swept? Then we're back to where we were 6 months ago.
Well, except for the fact that they will now be in the semifinals, right? Because if they win the Canadian division, the team that gets out is now in the Final Four. So that's a good thing, right? That's as far as they got in 2003 and '92, right? So that's an improvement.
There you go, Joe.
Claude, what do you think?
Well, first of all, I hate the fact that even Sheldon Keefe threw his goaltenders under the bus the other night because they lost the game. More than just the goalie. The goalie, of course, has to make saves, but the team in front of him has to play better. The defense has to play better. The forwards have to play better. And how about all those multi-million dollars trying to score a few more times, right? Let's remember David Ayers came out of the stands to win a game for Carolina here in Toronto because the team in front of them better than the Leaf team played in front of their goalie. So you can't blame it all on the goalie. But secondly, there's no doubt that this team has a lot of skill. I like the addition, if he's anything like his dad, and we've seen how Nick Foligno plays, and we know what his dad meant to this team in the early 90s. He'll be he'll be a plus. And yes, this person gets back, and then maybe the team will feel like they've got a better chance. I don't know. I don't know how they're not thinking, hey, maybe our goalie isn't top flight, but we got to play better in front of them. We're going to, first of all, they have to win a round before you can start thinking about or talking about, hey, this team's going to be a Stanley Cup contender, which everybody seems to be anointing them in the last few years. How about winning a round first? And then we'll talk about whether you're good enough to win the Stanley Cup.
Lance, what do you think? Do you think that Kyle Dubas did his job in the offseason? Do you think he's put together a team that is capable of winning? Do you think he's done his job?
I think he's on the hook for whatever happens here is what I think. I think this is more his team. So, I mean, he's got his coach. I think the coach is not the problem. I like Sheldon Keefe a lot. But I think it's if he can't win with the group that he's assembled, then I think they're going to start looking at him. So they'll point their gun sights at him if they aren't good enough to win, as Claude suggests, a round. I would expect that they have to win at least a round and probably two. I think semifinals is small beans for these guys. If they're as advertised, then they should be able to at least make the Stanley Cup final, and that's what people said going in. They were good enough to do that, and I'd have to hold them to that. So if they fall anywhere short of that, I don't think that we can say, hey, and I'm not trying to condone or argue with anybody's look at the Leafs, but I don't think semifinals is going to be good enough. They're going to have to go to the Stanley Cup final in order to make things work, because we've had too many times we've said, well, it's okay, well, it's okay. We've been saying that since 1967. Well, it's not okay. It's win or bust.
The Leafs are not being really open about their injuries. Of course, no NHL team really is. We don't really know what's wrong with Zach Hyman. Suneel, do you think that this team is in trouble if Hyman is unable to continue?
With the addition of Nick Foligno, they might be able to mitigate his absence for a couple, 3 weeks. Maybe Wayne Simmons can pick up his play a little bit. But last year's team, if they'd lost Zach Hyman, it would have been over. And as it turned out, it was over regardless of whether they played with him or without him. So I think this team is able to withstand his absence as long as it's not long term. But as I mentioned earlier, when you're getting into the playoffs and you're playing, and if you do get it to the semifinal and you're playing a Boston, a Vegas, a Tampa, a Washington, you're going to need all of those guys, including Foligno, including Simmons. Joe Thornton has to also become a presence as well.
Morgan Riley's been taking some heat lately from the fans. Claude, do you think it's warranted? Do you think that Morgan has to step it up?
Maybe it's a bit of both, but the fact is, you know what Leaf fans are like. You know what Leaf fans. they got to find somebody to pick on, right? So for the longest time, it was Anderson. So now it's Morgan Riley. Whoever else they want to pick on, right? It was Gardner for a couple of years. There's always somebody to blame. I don't know why you blame Morgan Riley. He is what he's a puck moving, skating defenseman. He's not a big bruising type that defends the net. So what do they want from this guy? The job when he's out there is to try to corral that puck and find a forward and get it up to him or skate it up himself. He's not a big bruising defenseman. So understand what you have before you start complaining about what you don't have. And that's why they went out and got guys like Brody and Bogosian, and now the other defenseman they picked up, Sutton. So, I mean, that's
Hutton.
why they went out and got
Hutton, Ben
what's
Hutton.
that?
Yeah.
Sorry, Hutton.
Ben
Yeah,
Hutton.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So that's why they went out and got those guys, because that's not what Morgan Riley is, and he's never been. So, I mean, the argument about whether he's a good defenseman or not, it's what you have him out there for. I mean, he's an offensive-minded defenseman. It's kind of awkward to say, and it's oxymoron, but he's an offensive defenseman, and that's plain and simple. And anybody else, like obviously missing Zach for any long period of time, he's like the heart of this team. He's one of the few guys that actually goes into the corners and grinds things out and goes and digs the puck. When Wayne Simmons stays healthy, he can give them some of that grit, and Foligno will definitely bring some of that grit. But there's no doubt that Zach Hyman is the heart and soul of the grittiness and the X factor, the sandpaper, Darcy Tucker type. And I don't like really comparing guys, but I mean that's the closest guy I can compare him to right now. That he's that kind of player and that kind of valuable for this team.
You could make the argument
and I
that he's
think,
the most valuable player, you know.
Right. Yeah. So let's finish that thought, Lance. Okay. So, I think Simmons might not be 100%. I think he's going to be, if he could get back to 100% before the season ends, I think that'll be a factor as well. But what do you think this team has the talent to get this done? Do you think this is a possibility for this team to win it all? And if not, who would be the team that you would pick?
Well, you look at in playoffs, you look at goaltending. Do they have the goaltending? Well, they have the goaltending if Anderson is there. Do they have the power play? Well, there's an interesting one because power plays are magnified in the playoffs. Do they have the power play? It certainly doesn't look like it. They had it, and they lost their mojo, and I don't know what's going on there. And the coaches don't know, I'm sure. And the players, I'm not sure, understand what's going on. But whatever it is, that's got to get fixed. Penalty killing, I think, is okay. Face-offs, I think they're real good. And all of those small things are magnified in the playoffs. So there's probably one or two other things too. I mean, some obvious stuff that I'm forgetting or miss, but those things for the Leafs are okay. It's just, is Joe Thornton done? He's certainly slowed down since the beginning of the season. Is Wayne Simmons hurt? Yeah, I'm sure he's hurt. They'll all be hurt. They're playing playoff style hockey in terms of time. They're playing every 2 days. So you're going to get hurt. So that's the other thing is injuries. You look at Hyman, and I think Hyman is, like I said, I think he would be considered one of the most valuable players, and he will be in the playoffs because he's a Nazem Kadri, Brad Marchand kind of player where he gets his face dirty, he gets in the blue paint, and he stays there, and he toughs it out. So the grit, I suppose, would be the other thing that you could talk about with the Leafs. But that's one thing. I have to tell you, I think Morgan Riley is an outstanding hockey player and a great individual. And I don't know who's crapping on him, but they got to be kidding me. Because for years, the Leafs have tried to make do with one or two decent defensemen, and then they fill in the rest. They've got when they're healthy, they've got a pretty good group now, better than I thought they were going to be. They have some Stanley Cup veteran presence in Bogosian. So they have some guys who know how to win. And I like Morgan Riley. I've liked him from the first time he skated for the Leafs. I think he's a real good find and a real good kid, and I think he'll be just fine come playoffs. He's a Paul Coffey type player. As was a Claude that suggested he's not a big physical presence. He doesn't have to be. You need a puck mover, and he's the puck mover. So I think they'll be okay. I'm looking forward to seeing when the games really matter, which is coming pretty quick. It'll be interesting to see how they do, and it will be interesting to see how they fare between now and playoff time, just in terms of health, because if you can get them all healthy, including the goaltender, number one, that's the number one position, I think if you can get them going in the right direction just before playoffs, maybe you do the St. Louis Blues thing and hit it right.
Beautiful, yeah. So I really like what TJ Brody's brought to the team too. He's dynamite. He's as solid as they come. Suneel, your thoughts? Can this Leafs team win? Where and will it win? If not the Leafs, who would do it?
Yes, they can, but as Lance mentioned, until we know who their goaltender is going to be going into the playoffs and whether Jack Hyman will be healthy, how does Mick Foligno fit the mix that they're trying to put together, and whether Wayne Simmons gets healthy or not, then you put the pieces together, you'll be able to see what kind of a team they really have. Because when the season started, they started like a house on fire. Everything was clicking. Simmons was healthy, got into a fight in his first game against Montreal, set the tone. All of those things sort of just got into place. Frederick Anderson was playing terrific as well. Right now, it's like they're leaking oil, and you take the car into the shop, and the mechanic is walking around going, "I don't know what's wrong, but I'm going to try and fix it." And hopefully, 10 games to go, they'll be able to do just that. If not them, well, I think, as I mentioned, you look at Tampa, you look at Washington, and you look at Pittsburgh. Those are the teams in the East. Out West, I haven't seen much of Vegas or Dallas, but any of those teams could certainly be the team to beat in this year.
Claude, what do you think? Yes or no? The mechanic will come in and fix this.
Yeah, well, we're going to need a heavy-duty mechanic here. I think that they do have the parts, obviously. Can we soup up some of those parts? I don't know. Maybe like a little Fast and Furious kind of thing. Yeah. And hi, Ken. Thanks for the shout out.
Hi, Ken.
Ken Regular, everybody. So I would say that they do have the pieces. I think could be a big part of this. Of course, the goaltending is going to have to be sound, especially in the playoffs. Remember last year in that play-in round against Columbus, it wasn't even the playoffs. It was a play-in round. And everybody blamed Anderson when the scores were 3-2. Remember, there was that one game the Leafs came back. I think they were down 3-0 and came back and won 4-3. But now it was all Anderson's fault that they lost last year. It wasn't the fact that they couldn't score a goal worth a lick against that team who basically bullied them all over the ice, right? I mean, that's Columbus played. They were just big and physical. Yep. And when you're talking about that this time around, I think Winnipeg's that kind of team. I think Winnipeg's the team to watch in this division. They're only 4 points back. They're going to play them back-to-back now in the next few days. And then we're going to see where the Leafs really are, because if this doesn't wake them up and challenge them to say, hey, look, here's our season right here where we could finish first, and this is the team we're probably going to have to end up beating to get out of this division, then we'll see what they're made of. And then you go from there. But, of course, the chance. Every team has a chance. Like Lance said, look what St. Louis did a couple of years ago. Nobody picked them. They came from dead last to win it all with the hot goalie house who was a rookie. So anything's possible, but they got to start putting it together. You can't be losing 5 games in a row this late into the season and suddenly flip it. You can't do that.
Okay, well, I got to switch gears here. I want to touch on a couple more sports before I let you guys go, because this would be great. I love you guys. So Lance, Raptors, they had a 1-13 March. Then they turned around and they're 7-4 in April. I just when you thought they were tanking and maybe going after a lottery pick, all of a sudden they're in that 7, 8, 9, 10 kind of bubble. Should they go for it or should they tank? Where should the Raptors be here?
Well, I don't believe they'll tank. I think they've got too many guys with a championship pedigree to do that. So I think when they all get back together and play well, as they have done recently, somewhat surprisingly well, I think in some cases, I think they're a team that can challenge. Well, I think they're going to make the playoffs, it looks like now. So that's great because they've got their bodies back. How far they'll go, I don't know. I think it's difficult to tell because they're not the same team that won the championship, but yet they still have guys with championship pedigrees, and they still have Lowry running the backcourt. So I think they'll be okay. That'd be fascinating to see them do well in the playoffs after the year that they've had up and down.
Suneel, are you confused? I mean, these guys were out with undisclosed injuries, and all of a sudden last night, there they are, Siakam and Lowry and Freddie and Anunoby all back against like opponent that they always want to beat, Brooklyn.
well, maybe the fine had something to do with it. All of a sudden, they got healthy when the team had to write a $25,000 check.
Yeah,
But
right.
that's the key. I mean, it's been the case all year. Just who's healthy, who's not, and if they're going to do something down the stretch, they better. They started it last night by beating Brooklyn without Durant and Harden, so that's a good step. And now they're in the 10th spot in the play-in position at this point. But the question is, who's healthy and who's not, and how long will they stay healthy? If they stay healthy, sure, they can get up to maybe as high as 8 and not have to worry about anything.
Claude, are you? Do you think this team has any shot at all if they manage to make it into the play-in?
I mean, I think it's great. Anybody who apparently is around Masai says the last thing this team wants to do is tank, and clearly they went out and got some help in the middle when they got Kem Birch, the Canadian from Montreal, and Gillespie, the rookie. That shored up the middle, which was the whole year. Imagine if they had had one or two of those guys early in the year when they were at 500, where they might be sitting right now. That has been the whole year. Obviously, health has been the other issue. But the fact is that they've won 4 in a row now. They put themselves in a position to try to get into the round and maybe, as Suneel said, get all the way up to 8th. Obviously, this isn't the team that won it all 2 years ago, but as Lance mentioned, the pedigree from some of these guys that know how to win is there. So I like their chances to make a run for it, and this was the time to put a winning streak together, because if they had lost 4 in a row, then we're not talking about this really done. So I like the fact that they've shown a little bit of grit, and the fact that they had all their guys back on the court last night. The only concern now is that they lost Chris Boucher last night to a sprained ankle, and we don't know how long he might be out. Hopefully he bounces back soon, because he's having a hell of a year unexpectedly, and he's been a big part of this. So I still think they have a shot. And as long as, like Lance said, as long as Kyle's out there and as long as Van Vliet's out there and OG and some guys, and I love the way Malachi Flynn has played this year. If those guys are contributing, then yes, they have a chance for sure.
Yeah, and Boucher's been incredible too. I saw him twist his ankle or knee, whatever it was. It was originally, it looked like an ankle, but apparently it might be a knee strain. Yep. But anyway, I just hope that he's okay, because he's been incredible too. The Canadians on this team, it's awesome. Yeah. Okay, let's switch to baseball, Lance. So the Blue Jays, they get George Springer in the offseason. Looks like we might finally get a chance to see Springer this weekend. What are your thoughts on the Blue Jays and where they're at, and if they have a chance to contend?
Well, I think they have a chance to contend. I think everybody is expecting that. You can't have enough pitching, right? It all comes down to pitching. You can have all the offense in the world. They're a fun team to watch offensively. They're going to get better when Springer shows up. And that that will be a lot of fun to watch the first few games that he plays, which I guess is right around the corner now. So that would be terrific. I think they've managed to hold their own. They've held their own against the Yankees, which is always a good thing for Toronto. They haven't so much against Boston, but it's still early and they haven't played them that much yet. So I think it'll depend on the pitching. I know that the bullpen is held up pretty well, all things considered, though they don't have a real closer in there. And it looks like they're not going to this year. So they'll have to make do. But, so far so good for the Blue Jays. I think they're entertaining and they're fun to watch and they're contending. And I think if they can contend into September, then I think we're all pretty fortunate to have had them play well and do good things for a pretty young club. Don't forget, they're still a pretty young ball club. So lots to learn, and veterans like Springer will really help them there, I think.
Yeah, they have done pretty well against the Yankees. It's unfortunately that their closer went down before the season even started. They had to have Tommy John surgery. Are you surprised that, well, of course, they handled the Yankees, Suneel, but everybody's sort of handling the Yankees right now. Are you surprised that the standings seem to be flipped right now, with the Boston at the top and the Yankees at the bottom? Jay's kind of in the middle?
Very surprised. Yeah, very surprised, because the Yankees were supposed to be the runaway team in the East, and everybody else was supposed to be fighting for the wild card in the American League. So I'm more than surprised that the Yankees are having all the problems that they're having offensively. As far as the Blue Jays are concerned, the two things that concern me most is their pitching depth and health, depending on how you want to phrase it, and the other is their defense. They've been making uncharacteristic errors from certain players like Biggio and Bo Bichette. hopefully when Springer gets back and playing, the outfield is played pretty well. Those are the two things that really concern me. If they can get those things cleaned up, meaningful games in September, hopefully with some fans in the stands, boy, dare to dream, huh?
Right.
That'd be great.
Well, it scared me when Biggio threw one in the dirt against the Red Sox, in that late night game when they had a couple men on, and oh no, here we go. But then the last two throws to first were on the money, so we made it. Claude, your thoughts? What are your thoughts about the Blue Jays right now?
Yeah, listen, they're still a young team. It kind of reminds me, and I hate to make a lot of comparison, but it reminds me a bit of the 83, 84 Blue Jays, where they had some of the younger guys. Remember the outfield they had? What a great outfield with Bell and Mosby and Barfield. And they had some younger pitchers. Remember until 84, 85 that Jimmy joined. He was in the bullpen before that. So, I mean, I like the position players that they have. Pitching's the big issue, as Lance pointed out. Remember, last night they went with a bullpen start, which I'm just not a big fan of that at any point for any team. I mean, it just shows that you have a lack of depth. I know they're holding that spot probably for Nate Pearson when he gets back, but even so, you've got a couple of good pitchers at the top of the rotation, and then you're kind of crossing your fingers when you throw the next few guys out there. But 8-10 without George Springer and Bonafide, maybe 4 and 5 starter early into the season, not so bad. I mean, if they were 2-16, everybody would be panicking. But 8-10 in that division, they're holding their own. I don't think Boston's going to maintain this all year, and the Yankees will get better. And Tampa seems to always be Tampa. They find a way to get stuff done. They seem to catch a hot streak at the right time, and it always seems to come against the Jays for some reason, so who knows. But it'll be entertaining, and at least the Jays are in the mix this year, which we haven't been able to say for the last years, right?
Yeah, and Nate Pearson is apparently throwing simulated sessions on the side, so it'd be nice when we can get that 103, 104 mile an hour fastball cranked up against teams like the Red Sox and the Yankees. Okay, I know that you have to run right away, Claude. So I'm going to start you off with my last thing here. We recently lost a good friend of all of ours, Tom Gibney, passed away, and I just want you to share a quick story. For me, it was like he always referred to me, how's Mrs. Tilley's little boy? He always said to me, and he always got a chuckle whenever I ran into the studio at the last minute. He just laughed, but he always kept such a positive mood in the studio. It was awesome to work with him. Claude, what do you remember most about Tom?
I just remember walking into the newsroom in 1994 in Agincourt when we were still down in the dungeon down there, and that was before they built the West Wing, so the windows actually had light coming in. It was a great environment, no matter how much I sort of make fun of it, because everybody there got along. That was the first thing that struck me from the walked in there was I was this scared rookie, basically. I called myself a rookie because it was my first go at a major TV station in the city. And he was one of the first people that I met. He just happened to catch me out of the corner of his eye, whatever. He came over, he introduced himself, and then he asked me about me. But I'm watching this Toronto icon on television for years, and suddenly he's making me feel welcome. The first day in that newsroom, said all that needed to be said about what kind of person Tom Gibney was. And then the odd time in the early years when I started to get a chance to, and I'd be on the desk with him, watching him do the news, and I'm sitting beside him, ready to do sports. Kind of surreal, and I could say the same thing about Dave Duvall. These two guys, and obviously all you guys as well, welcomed me in. But that's my first impression of Tom, was that he was just such a nice man, very obviously great at what he did, but also how welcoming he was. He didn't give me one iota of a sense that he had any kind of an ego, that he was bigger than everybody. Everybody knew who he was, but he sure didn't act like it. And that's what I really admired about him.
Kind man. Suneel.
I first met Tom in 1978. I just finished second year at Ryerson. I was working at CFRB as a news tape editor, and he would come on Saturday mornings, even though he worked at CFTO at the time, 5 days a week, and he'd do the mid-morning shift, so he'd come in around 7 to about 11, and I would be the one to give him tape with leads and for his newscast on the hour and on the half hour. At one point, we had a breaking news, and if you remember in those days, well, we had the wire stories, and you had to rip it and run it into whomever. And I was deathly afraid of walking into the news booth while Tom was reading. So I would wait to the commercial before the weather, and then I would slide it to him. And I was told in no uncertain terms that under no circumstance do you wait, just walk in, slide the piece of paper there, and let whoever it is take care of it. And so for the following newscast, same thing happened. I walked in, slid the paper, and Tom read the story as if he'd been working on it for an hour and a half. And I was in such awe of that. And I thought, man, if I could get to read 3 lines or ad-lib 3 lines without fumbling and stumbling my words, then maybe I might have a chance to make it in this business. That's what I think of Tom Gibney.
Yeah, what a great set of pipes too. And Lance, last but not least, certainly you, the guy who sat beside him for, I don't know, 25 years. Tell me what you remember about Tom.
Well, he was my second father. I'm still mourning him a little bit. The last time I saw him, it was in a kidney dialysis area where my wife works, and Andrea is her name, and she said, "Hey Lance, Tom's coming in." So I said, "Okay, don't tell him I'm coming." So I came and popped by and saw him and joked around with him. I sort of fooled him because he didn't know who was. I said, "Excuse me, sir, could you move over? I'd like to sit down." So he moved over. He moved over on the couch or whatever it was. It didn't really realize, and then when he did, it was. I just laughed out loud. And that was the thing with him. He was such a genuine man. He was one of the most genuine people in a sometimes disingenuine business. He was just the guy from Yorkton. I've got lots of Gibney stories, too many to tell here. My favorite is he loved to golf. The golf was his thing, so he would golf every day if he could. So some years in, I sit down at the anchor desk. We're getting ready to go on the air, and I said, "So what'd you do today?" And he said, "I went golfing." I said, "How'd it go?" And he said, "I'm quitting." I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah, I've had enough. I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm done with golf. I'll be doing something else, but I'm not going to golf again. I'm fed up." You know it's coming, right? You know it's coming. So I said, "Okay." So the next day, I'm sitting at the desk, and I said, "So what did you do today?" And he said, "Oh, I shot a 72. I had one of my best times ever." And that was Tom to a T. If he liked you, he liked you. If he didn't like you, you knew that he didn't like you. But he was a really wonderful guy to work with. And there wasn't one day, and I think you guys, we all have this in common. There wasn't one day that I didn't look forward to going into work. I never, and I told my kids this, for God's sakes, guys, whatever you do in life, make sure that you love it. And I loved my job, and he made it all the better for being there. He's a great man. I miss him.
Yeah. Right.
As do I.
Yeah, he was. I bet you quit golfing for what, half an hour?
If that. He probably went home and watched the Golf Channel.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Now I know what I was doing. Right? I'm good now. So anyway, guys, Lance, you talked about Tom being a genuine guy. Well, I'm looking at 3 genuine guys right here, and it's been a pleasure having you on. And let's do it again. Love to have you guys on again, and we talk some sports and whatever comes up. But as members of Joe Tilley Sports, guests on Joe Tilley Sports. Regular members would be fine. Yeah, we'd like to have you. We got a Club Link foursome, so let's get out there and knock it around when it's safe to do so. And looking forward to doing that. Remember, we're all in it together, and we've got more sports when I come back. Thanks, guys.
All right.
Thanks. Good seeing you guys.
Hi, guys. Suneel, Claude.
Good seeing you. Yeah.
Promotional consideration provided by ClubLink. ClubLink. One membership, more golf. Slow play. It's a slippery slope. First you go looking for that lost ball, and then everything goes sideways. There are a lot of golfers on the course. Make certain of your point of entry, look quickly, and move on. Remember, we're here for a good time, not a long time. Find anything, Bob?
Not yet.
Addiction Rehab Toronto, Toronto's #1 alcohol and drug treatment center, saving lives, reuniting families. The only treatment center in the province to offer medical detox, treatment, sober living, and lifetime aftercare all in one place. Our unique and specialized programs are designed to equip our clients with the tools to successfully lead a life of dignity, respect, and purpose. Let us help save your life or your loved one's life. Call today for more information or to facilitate an intervention. 1-855-787-2424 or visit addictionrehabtoronto.ca. Joe Tilley Sports is brought to you by COSA, Central Ontario Standardbred Association, providing a united voice for harness horse people racing at Ontario tracks. Check out your benefits today at COSAonline.com and check out COSA TV on Facebook and YouTube for all the latest harness news and live action updates. Live racing year-round. Go to hpibet.com for all your wagering options. Become a member today and your first bet is free. That's hpibet.com.
Well, the short-handed Raps are still managing to make a run at the playoffs, ripped the Nets by 11 points for their fourth straight win. And they also took care of some business, signing Yuta Watanabe to a standard NBA contract. Now, Watanabe is a former Atlantic Conference Defensive Player of the Year at George Washington University. 6'9", 205-pound forward, is averaging 4 points, 3.3 rebounds, and 13.4 minutes in 39 games as a Rap. With more on Canadian hoops, here's Keegan Levine.
Thanks, Joe. Welcome to another segment of Canadian Hoop and Scoop. I'm Keegan Levine, talking all things Canadian basketball. And history was made this past Oklahoma City Thunder Toronto Raptor matchup. 3 Montrealers played in an NBA game for the first time in NBA history, that being Kem Birch, Chris Boucher, and Luguentz Dort. But for this week, we're going to get back to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's story and his journey to the NBA.
SGA, stutter step, hard to the rim, and he climbs the ladder for the slam.
The road wasn't easy. At age 14, Shai began his high school career at St. Thomas More Catholic Secondary School in Hamilton, Ontario, where he did not make the junior team, but he used it as an incentive to improve.
It motivated him a lot. I felt like he took that personal.
In the 10th grade, he was on to Sir Allan McNabb Secondary School in Hamilton, where his game took off.
I feel like after that just clicked, I remember me just shooting around with him. He asked me certain moves to do, and then he would ask even his other cousin to kill, and then from really there he just play his AAU team, and then McNabb. Grade 10 is when I really seen him change drastically. His game just got way better.
Starting at guard, 6'5" senior, number 2, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander.
From there, Shai moved his talents down to Hamilton Heights Christian Academy in Chattanooga, Tennessee, to face top competition, and he excelled alongside his cousin Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Averaging just over 18 a game at Hamilton Heights, Shai earned the status of a 4-star recruit, and many Division I teams pursued him, but Shai landed in Kentucky as a Wildcat.
Spins, goes to the rack, score it, and one. Gilgeous-Alexander, showtime! Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, 27 points, 6 rebounds. And those Kentucky fans, those loyal ones over there, they're used to this, celebrating their team right into the Sweet 16.
Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, one of the NBA's brightest young Canadian stars, and I can't wait to see where his NBA career takes him because he's just getting started, folks. And this has been Canadian Hoop and Scoop. I'm Keegan Levine for Joe Tilley Sports.
All right, thanks, Keegan. Well, what'd you think of Soccer Super League? That was over quick, wasn't it? Kind of reminded me of March. In like a lion, out like a lamb, barely whimper. Well, that's what happens when you get franchises run by oversized egos who are totally out of touch with the fans. Speaking of soccer, TFC was humiliated 4-2 by Montreal last week. Must have been a mental letdown after that huge win over Lyon. Next up, Vancouver. The Canadian Football League has decided to back up the season a little bit. They now plan to open things up on August 5th, kicking off a 14-game slate. They also expect to have some fans in the seats. The league may open the schedule in the prairies, where the chances of getting fans in the seats would be greater than in other parts of the country at this particular time. The 147th edition of the Kentucky Derby is coming up on May 1st. Now, I've got my eye on a horse named Rock Your World. He rocked the field in the Santa Anita Derby in his dirt debut, coming off 2 victories on the turf. Ridden by Umberto Rispoli and trained by John Sadler, Rock Your World took the lead early at Santa Anita, and he would take it wire to wire, opening up at the end over the favorite Medina Spirit, who is trained by Bob Baffert. Now, Baffert's won a few big recent races, and Medina Spirit was quite a large favorite heading this race, but Rock Your World got it done. Now heads into the Derby, a perfect 3-0, and looking pretty good. Rock Your World. Soup and Sandwich is another horse you may want to consider in the run for the Roses, once again coming up on May 1st at Churchill Downs. Well, our weekly sports contest is certainly heating up. We are giving away 12 awesome Mitch Marner t-shirts and 3 collector prints, courtesy of the talented artist Rod McDougall. You can enjoy Rob's work at robmcdougall.com. To enter, simply subscribe to Joe Tilley on YouTube. That's it. Just subscribe. It's easy and it's free. 1 t-shirt or print will be handed out each week, and we'll notify the winners as well as call their names out on the show. This week's winner is Justin Dubé of Lancaster. Congratulations, Justin, and good luck to y'all. And we close the show with a look at the folks who make it all possible. These are friends, trusted business associates, and all-around great folks. A reminder, and I highly recommend them all. A reminder, you can see the show also on the Spanglish Network, Zingo TV, and the Fired Up Network. Thanks once again to our guests this week, Lance, Suneel, and Claude. And thank you for watching. Join us next week when we welcome the Iron Man, Gary Unger. We'll see you then.
Get Aldo at Remax Crossroads. Do you want to buy or sell a home? Could 31 years of real estate experience help you? Why not speak to an amazing team that loves to overpromise and overdeliver? Call 416-GET-ALDO or visit www.getaldo.com to find out what next level real estate looks like. RS Demolition and Excavation has extensive experience with complete teardowns and interior strip-outs. Looking to build a custom home? RS Excavating Services has the experience you need to build and establish neighborhoods. For the highest level of quality and cost-efficient results, we provide innovative demolition solutions completed on time and on budget while ensuring our #1 priority, safety. Call 647-852-3006 for an estimate or visit rsdemolition.ca. Brian Gribben Insurance Planning, helping you solidify your financial future.
At BGIP, what we do that's unique in the marketplace is we show people how to spend and enjoy their money in their early years of retirement without the fear of running out. Also, we're able to do this without you having to change financial advisors. Please look us up at bgip.ca today. Let's book a 30-minute phone call to see how we can bring value to you and your family in your planning.
Call Brian today for all your retirement needs. We did. 905-686-5678. Gold Line Resources, discovering high-grade gold in Sweden. Gold Line Resources owns a prospective portfolio of 4 high-grade gold exploration projects located on the Gold Line mineral belt of north-central Sweden, and 1 gold exploration project in the Skellefteå belt of north-central Sweden. For more information on how you can invest in this new initiative, go to goldlineresources.com or call 1-800-858-9710. Gold Line Resources can also be found on the TSX Ventures Exchange as GLDL. Looking for an advantage in choosing your investment options? Belmont Venture Capital will provide you with the best up-to-date opportunities in the mid-cap and junior sector. The company was formed 12 and a half years ago and is spearheaded by 2 seasoned veterans of the financial markets with over 80 years combined experience. Go to BelmontVentureCapital.com today for the latest hot picks on the market. And don't forget to sign up for the newsletter. BelmontVentureCapital.com.
is all I